Okay, everyone. We are talking today about self as context. So, self as context can be a little bit of a trickier narrative because this requires a lot of observation and essentially feeling and observing those thoughts and feelings as much as they arise and come up. Cool. So, we're going to today share, oh, and always, as always, I'm Meg Solomon with ABA Across Environments. For CEUs, make sure that you email ace@acrossenvironments.com and please allow 2 weeks for that response. Okay, so today we're going to go through the research. There's actually quite a bit when we talk about self. And the reason I say that is because as behavior analysts, there's quite a bit of research that goes back to Skinnerian days that talk about self-awareness. And I think that that's really just kind of important to be to kind of think about, right? So self as context has been this thought really for quite a long time, as well as the idea and approach of actual perspective taking, which is also part of self as context. So we're going to review the research. Then we're going to go through some really useful activities that we can do for ourselves. Because again, this whole series is really designed to make sure that what we're doing is practicing ourselves first so that then we are really fluent with the practice and able to then apply those principles elsewhere. And then we're going to again look at this application. We're going to specifically look at a caregiver um, application, just because, again, that's where a lot of our research actually is and where ACT is applicable at this time, as according to insurance. So self as context is really this big question of who. Who have you been? Who are you? Who do you want to be? Right? So this is what we're hoping for ourselves, but notice how it's still for ourselves, right? When we're talking about this future self. So where do you envision yourself? Where have you seen yourself and observed yourself? And then how are you currently observing yourself and what's happening? So what all has the research said? Let's see. So Robert Wickland, and I will say most of these resources, not most of these, some of these resources came from a very dear friend of mine. So I want to just say thank you so very much um, for sharing some of this research about self-reflection and self-awareness when it comes to applied behavior analysis. So Robert Wickland essentially says this. The person who becomes self-aware is more likely to act consistently and also giving accurate reports about themselves. We were talking about this earlier in, um, oh my gosh, this week has been so long. We were talking about this earlier in our agency, which was that we often think about verbal behavior and how we're supposed to not accept it. And yet ACT has really developed a lot within verbal behavior, right? So like self-reporting and like giving accurate information. But I think that it's because of this assumption, this underlying assumption that you are actually self-aware. And so you're going to accurately self-report. So I think that's just kind of a reflection to think about here, right? So what are we really trying to learn here? Are we trying to be self-aware, but then also look at this as how it reflects our own behavior? And I think that's what Wickland is also saying, right? So we have to think that this self-awareness should essentially be our baseline before we can accept verbal behavior from our own self-report, much less from anybody else's. All right. So as I said, our good old friend Skinner. I've always loved Skinner. I'm giving y'all time to read, mostly because I know that you're capable of doing that. And sometimes it's just not fun to read off of the sides. And also, I like to drink tea. Okay, so again, we're talking about this verbal report, but then we also talk about this behavior called knowing. That's very much one of those inner behaviors, right? And we talk about knowing, but really it's a fluency. So this is what we're talking about within this year-long series, is that this is truly a fluency practice for us, skill building, so that as we're practicing this, we're building our awareness skills, our self-awareness skills, right? We are then developing this ability to accurately self-report. And then what we're able to do is look within our community and shift our perspective to be able to radically accept the perspective of our community. And y'all, if there's anything that we need right now as a field for ourselves, for our community, it's this, right? So I'm not, I'm, it's a shameless plug, but it's fine. So Reframe starts with a whole self-assessment. So this book that we wrote is very much designed to remind us as implementers that our self-awareness is one of the key pieces of behavior analytic approaches. Cool. So this is from Dr. Hayes. This is straight from his introduction course, his ACT course. And all of those things are available on his website. So if you literally just Google Stephen C. Hayes, it's going to come up and you'll find all of these amazing resources. Lots of extensive trainings, some really expensive, some not. It's he's got a wide breadth of things to go from. He also has a YouTube channel too. So if you just YouTube it too, you'll get a lot of information from him. Anyway, this is what he says about self as context. Relational frame theory, right? So it is this idea of I, you, this two-way relationship, but then it builds upon that. Okay, well, what's another way to say multiple? We, us, them, all of us. If you're from Texas or the South, or if, my I'm looking, my husband's driving away. He's nowhere near from the South, but y'all, right? All y'all. Very few people say all y'all, but it's there more. If there's more than two people, all y'all. All right. So it says that it's developed. So it says, sorry, I'm just reading this last sentence. Self as context is developed and act by mindfulness exercises, metaphors, and experiential processes. And so we're going to do some of that today. We are going to go through some kind of like our personal activities are going to be a little bit more in depth, right? We're going to be some experiential metaphors. So these kind of, we're combining this experiential processes with metaphors. So kind of excited about it. Should be fun. All of those resources too are available for you to download. Okay, cool. This is also from Dr. Hayes and his work. Actually, no, I take that back. Hold on. I've got a link to it, don't I? Nope, sure don't. Usually I do. We'll go through our references at the end because this is actually not from Dr. Hayes. Um, okay, it's okay. It's going to bother me, and that's fine. I'm going to accept it and move forward. So the process, sorry, it's the title process measures doesn't actually matter. But what I wanted to highlight here was just self as context is an extension of mindfulness as it simultaneously emphasizes the transient nature of private experience whilst highlighting the self as a constant. Yep, sorry. Oh, where these experiences take place. So as a constant where these highlighting the self as a constant where these experiences take place. Oh, that's a wordy definition. I can tell a behavior analyst wrote this one. Okay, so, but at the same time, let's break this down. So it basically says that we all have these shared, right, transient, shared experiences of private experiences or private events, right? We also recognize that I am here, y'all are there, but together we share this community, right? So that's pretty neat, pretty cool to think about. Okay, so this Coordinate All article, we argue that the self is multidimensional in nature, made up of both conscious and unconscious layers, and is informed by observations of others. Well, that's kind of combining all of these things, right? We're talking about that verbal report, talking about being able to trust it, multidimensional in nature, shared, inner behavior. That's a lot. Okay. So, ooh, I think we skipped this one. So let me go back. Act and components of the map. So this is a mindfulness action plan, essentially. And what's really cool about that particular article, so I encourage y'all to read it for sure, is that it aims to build upon psychological flexibility with these different exercises. So it it's a great article for like getting you into what you're doing, right? Um, anyway, so we're going to be also doing some kind of I am exercises today, but kind of in a way that we practice as behavior analysts already. Um, and kind of a fun way too. I'm happy. I hope at least. Okay, because if we've got to have some fun with what we're going to do when we talk about self-awareness, because sometimes self-reflection can be really hard because it can turn into rumination, and that's not then helpful, right? That's when our mind starts taking over and things are then unhelpful, and that's cognitive fusion, and that's really difficult to work through when you get stuck in those feelings. I'm going to close my blinds because the sun's just getting closer and closer to my eyeballs and I won't be able to see. Oh, that's somewhat better. No, not at all. Let's try it this way. There we go. All right, thanks. Whew, my eyes have to adjust now. I'm getting old. All right. And then we have this other beautiful article here. So self as context and depressive symptoms in the general population. And this is talking about a self experiences questionnaire. So again, this kind of, have you had some experiences in your life that could possibly led to this depressive state of where you are currently? Most of us would argue that yes, right? When we think about trauma and trauma-informed care practices, we often talk about ACEs and conducting just that 10-question survey for ourselves. But it's also in the medical community really important for them to understand too, because maybe there's a reason why there's some depression because there have been a lot of adverse childhood events, right? Something to think about. Okay, this is our first little exercise. If you have something to write with, great. If you don't, because I'm looking around right now, I'm like, oh, I don't think I have anything to write with. Just gonna look at my drawer. Ooh, yes, kind of. Okay, so pull it out and grab a piece of paper or your notes app. That's probably what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna pull open my notes app. I encourage you to do the same at this moment as our first little exercise. Okay, mine's up and ready. And it says, forgive yourself for not being the perfect what? So in this exercise, I want you to apologize to yourself for kind of beating yourself up anytime that you are not the perfect whatever. And if you need any help with that, there are a lot of songs that are about it too, from like a woman's perspective, which is really interesting. Um, but yeah, go ahead, take this moment and say, hey, Andrea, Meg, I forgive you for not being the perfect, and then I'm going to fill in my blank. You fill in your blank. And then what's something about you right now that the person who struggled with that perfection would be really proud of? Put that in that next thing. I'm really proud of you for what have you been doing? Okay, our first little exercise is done. There's a little bit of self-reflection there, which meant everybody from this shared experience of where we are had an inner behavior or somatic symptom arise. From ourself, right, from our own perspective, it is observable. Be aware of that right now, okay? Because we're going to come back to that in a little bit. Well, we're going to talk a little bit right now, but from a different perspective. So, oh gosh, y'all, there we go. I always have to move my chat boxes out of the way and my pictures, so I also only see one other person at a time with my view. So I apologize. I'm going to try to rotate the view, so not just singling out people. I really am. I apologize again. So here we are. This is self as context. Taking the perspective of others. I'm going to start right to left this time because I'm using a lot of others right now, right? Um, we are a community, and that's why. So we do have somewhat of a shared perspective already as part of this frame of a shared community, right? From a relational frame theory, an RFT perspective, we are part of a larger frame from within ourselves and the like framework of just people in general, right? And like that global Venn diagram of communities. So within this shared community, and even this little community right here, there are many different perspectives that may not align or be shared by our experiences or by our current experience. So, like past and present, and who knows for the future, right? Lord, who knows? But it's gonna be fine. So, we have to radically accept that. So that far-reaching acceptance that we might not have this global ability to understand everybody's perspective, we can still accept that that perspective exists. Cool, right? It's actually really empowering when you think about this because you're just kind of like, oh man, well, yeah, that's right. It almost strengthens then this other community that we have that we're building, this frame that we have. There can be other ways too that that frame weakens. And then you'll see this more of a separation from that community or like where that one or few perspectives start to leave that community or shift. That's a constant because it's change. So we get that too. That's part of this radical acceptance of different frameworks. They also exist. That was some pretty, it seems like quantum level stuff when we think about it, because it's not something that really we can touch. And we as behavior analysts really, really, really hate that. We hate when we can't observe in a tangible way this. And as we already know, unless you're self-aware, which most behavior analysts aren't, we can't trust anything that they say or that we say or that anyone says. So that verbal report means nothing. So how are we supposed to even understand, much less accept these perspectives? That's part of this kind of inner work here. Because here's what my grandmother would have said, my past self, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. In the big scheme of what is needed in your community, it doesn't matter. And that's the hardest thing for many of us to accept. That's why many of us as behavior analysts struggle to work with, and I say we because I, as a past self, have struggled with these behaviors. So I can switch this to an I statement if that makes y'all feel more comfortable. I'm totally fine with that. I have struggled with this as a behavior analyst, and I've observed other behavior analysts also struggle with this, with building community outside of the behavior analytic community because it's quote unquote not evidence-based, or because it's something that might not be part of their experiential learning history within how they learned the application of behavior analysis, whether in coursework or in their clinical experience or in their publication experience or in their graduate school experience, right? So when we think about our past experiences, we're bringing that to the table every single time. But if we're not aware of how it differs and how we then have to radically accept that somebody else's is different, then we're going to struggle to meet an OT where they are. We have been struggling to meet OTs where they are because they have been more compliance driven than any other community that I have ever worked with in my entire life. And I don't know what to do, but I'm trying to radically accept where they're coming from because they've shared their perspective, which is they have 30 minutes. And so I'm like, I get it. They don't have a lot of time to get these things done. However, is there a better way for us to help this learner continuously assent to this task that you're asking of them that's clearly challenging, but is it possible that it's not meaningful enough to that kiddo? Just throwing that out there. What would you do right now if you were to talk to yourself from back in the day? Like how much your behavior analytic practices have changed from even a year ago or 2 years ago, or in some cases, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I know that in the past 15 years, my behavior analytic practices have changed dramatically. I also know that there are some things that I carry with me because of that experience that I had from clinical experience and in-home experience and in schools experience and in community experience, right? I carry all of that with me, and it has shaped my perspective over time, just as it has shaped my behaviors. So that takes us to our present selves. That takes us to where we are right now, which is a whole self. We can think about our future self, but that's really not a part of the whole right now, if that makes sense. Past, absolutely. But where we see our values leading us, it's actually kind of like more of like this little like support system that's hopefully shifting us along the right way, right? So when we think about our present selves, we have to think about how we're currently showing up. And y'all, sometimes it's hard. I say that as somebody currently who has a messy bun, who took an hour and a half nap on the couch, who could not be awakened if my life depended on it this afternoon, because I had to take my parents and my son to the airport at like 4 o'clock this morning. And it was like, y'all, I'm going to need some more recovery time from that experience alone. Anyway, I'm sure everything's fine. Everything is fine. So, what I can observe right now is that I feel tired. But also, I can observe that, I mean, we're going to go back to that little exercise that we did just a second ago. I can observe those somatic feelings, those somatic symptoms that I was experiencing when I was engaging in this kind of reflective practice, this kind of forgiveness practice. All right. Speaking of, so you can observe somatic symptoms. You can observe the rise of your heartbeat, right? You can observe the heat that comes to your neck or your face, the flush. You can observe the tone of your voice, or so I have been told by my husband. You can also feel and hear the shake of your voice, right? So when we have to give that corrective feedback, and there's still that kind of just like that little waver, we can observe that, right, as ourselves. We can also observe our thoughts and our memories and our emotions that arise, especially whenever those you might be like, oh, man, why why is that shaking? And it's more than likely because of a thought, a memory, or an emotion. If it's something that you can't tact really well, it's more than likely a memory, right? If it's something that you're like, oh no, I know I'm pretty riled up, that means I'm angry, right? Or passionate. That's an emotion, right? If it's a thought, like sometimes that can also affect then these other somatic symptoms. Sometimes just thoughts can evoke differences in our behavior. And it's important that we recognize that because there is this idea of how inner behavior, the subconscious, right? Like when we go back to the research, that subconscious and the conscious align, right? The transient relationship, as that really lengthy definition was talking about. So you can observe what you hear. You can also observe how well you comprehended what you heard, what you thought you heard. And that's often whenever we recognize that there's this breakdown in communication. And that's okay. People struggle with direct communication because it's easier to engage in avoidant behavior instead of direct communication because you don't want to come across as quote unquote combative or aggressive. But the reality is that if everybody just kind of communicated and said, like, hey, this is what I need. Oh, I can't give you that right now. Okay, thanks. I'm going to move on to somebody else who can. This is what I need. Oh, I can't help you with that, but I know so and so who can. Let me introduce you. Huh. See, that's how we build community by directly communicating and then helping each other. I don't know. Okay, so overt behaviors and how they align with your values. Well, I just gave an example right there of how my behavior in that instance of directly communicating aligns with my values of helping others. Because here's the reality. I have a lot of mom friends, and sometimes we struggle because we work and we also have children. And sometimes I have a meeting that goes late. Sometimes one of my mom friends has a meeting that runs late. So we have this little group text called The Crew. And it's basically where somebody says, I'm going to grab the kids today. And you say, oh my God, thank you so much. Or you throw out there, I'm stuck in Denver. And somebody says, oh crap, I have a meeting late. I thought so and so could do it. And I say, it's okay. I know so and so can help us out here. It's how you build a little community. It's how your values align with helping others. You pick up the kids when you need to. You help each other out. Okay, so those are things that you can observe, right? So this is data from our own agency. This is also data that is provided well, not actually, it's not provided. I'm joking. It's part of workshop trainings, but it's this is data from completing the self-assessment and the behavior intervention plan that's within Reframe. Again, it's shipping in a few days, which is really exciting. So pre-orders are only available, I think, for like 2 more days, something crazy like that. Awesome. Okay, so anyway, so for the data, here's what we found as far as self-reflection and how important it is. Do you think that your ability to self-reflect affects the behaviors of others? Pretty much everybody said yes. Nobody said no, because here's the reality. It does, right? We all kind of understand this to some degree within this little frame of our community. This is another way that we can build community, recommending these types of practices to our friends. Um, I love the term calling in, right? So when we compassionately say, hey, friend, I think you might need to reflect upon this for a second. Sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes that kind of feedback is really helpful. We often ask that our supervisees give us that kind of feedback. And I'm just like, how do we expect that? Because it's not going to happen. There's a really good example of when the verbal report is not going to match, right? So they'll say, no, I don't have any, everything's good. I don't have any questions. No. Um, no, I have no corrective feedback for you, supervisor. Um, that's hard, right? We can't really expect that from our supervisees, in all honesty. So it is important that we're engaging in these practices within our with our peers, right? In our peer group, and how to engage in reflective practices ourselves, which again, and I'm going to say this often, ACT is a practice. Psychological flexibility is a practice. Engaging in selfish context is a practice. And I would say that this is one of the hardest parts of the practice. So you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, and we're going to try again because that's where our values align within this little frame, right? Okay. And then again, being able to address these kind of inner behaviors. Everybody, after completing these self-assessments, were like, yes, I'm 100% now aware when I am stressed out. But here's what I've also noticed from the staff who've completed this is that they very much advocate for themselves whenever they're starting to feel any of these types of inner behaviors, right? So instead of calling out the morning of, they say, hey, I think tomorrow I'm going to need the day off, right? That gives us about 24 hours to get things worked around, moved around. Today was not one of those days. Everybody was down, and that's okay. Sometimes weird little viruses go around, and that's where we are sometimes. That's okay. But also, I will say that people are advocating for themselves too in the moment. So let's say that they're with a learner who might be a little bit more attention like in need of attention and not in like a needy way, but in a safety way, right? That's going to burn you out. So what I'm noticing is people are saying, hey, in our Slack, can somebody sit with so and so for a second? And you're like, yeah, because you need to take a break and it's understandable. Okay, cool. I don't want to take up too much of our time. So I'm moving forward. Yes. Okay, good. That was my goal. We're doing great. These are the activities that we're going to go through today. So this first one on the left, this Mad Lib activity, we're going to, I constructed my own. So I'm really excited about it. But this is based off of day 17 from the AIM curriculum. So if you're not familiar with Accept, Identify, Move, it is Dixon and Polinas. It's a great way to get us started. Oh, sorry, Rachel, I had the chat box hidden and I'm just now seeing that comment. Oh my gosh, right? We expect our supervisees to do it. We should be able to do it ourselves. Agreed, 100% with regards to feedback. Could not agree more. So anyway, I love that. But this is from the Accept, Identify, Move, AIM curriculum. So we're going to do a little Mad Lib ourselves. We're not going to do this one word for word, but just because this one's geared toward teens. But I will say it's like I don't know if Mark Dixon's just like never met a teenager or I just or is just ableist. I'm not quite sure, but yeah. So anyway, we're gonna do kind of a take on this one, if you will. And then the other thing that we're gonna do is one of my favorite ones to do. And I know we wrote a little quick forgiveness to ourselves, but your assignment for like your little homework assignment activity is writing a thank you note to yourself. So I'm really excited about these today, y'all. All right. So Mad Lib time. Again, get out your note taker, get out your, yeah. And again, and with AIM, like, so I have to adjust every single experiential metaphor that it ever says. There's not a single one I don't think that I have implemented to the letter because I'm just like, y'all, who was this for? The nursing home community? What is this? What? Like, some of these metaphors, like kids are like, what are you talking about? They have no like tangible reference to any of these items. And they're just like, one girl said there was this totem pole one, and she said, I can't, I think it's the first one. She was like, that's against my religion. And I was like, that is fair and valid. And how was I not self-aware enough at that time to recognize that it wasn't culturally appropriate? Right? Because here's the thing. Now I can reflect upon that and be like, oh, I'm not even going to use that one, or I'm going to adjust what this looks like. Yes. So anyway, Mad Lib time, y'all. You are going to make a list of a noun or a pronoun, a verb, noun, a plural noun, past tense verb, adjective, present tense verb, adjective, past tense verb, noun, adverb, pronoun, noun. Okay, now so this says gerund. Do y'all know what a gerund is? It's like where you say ing, but it's the noun version of whatever that verb might be. An adverb is what modifies a verb. So like a lovely or lovingly. Sorry. It's a long day, y'all. Yes. Okay, y'all are good. Okay, amazing. An adjective, an emotion, a verb, a plural noun, a verb, a noun, an adjective, and then a value. Okay, if you don't want to do this now, that's okay. But I am going to give you about a minute to just quickly fill these out if you want to. Okay, so here's our Mad Lib, I think. There we go. Okay, so thank you, Canva, for actually having a Mad Lib template that I could modify. So y'all have access to this template, by the way. Um, so I'm not going to go through this one because if I say it, I don't know if it's going to make a lot of sense. So, but it's essentially just a self as context one. So you are talking about the things that you've learned, your past, your values, recognizing other people's behavior. All right, cool. Again, you have access to this one. So hopefully y'all are able to giggle a little bit about yourselves today. All right, this is one of my favorite applications. Again, you should have this one as well. Let me know if for some reason you don't, and I'm happy to email it to you. And this is for caregiver support within self as context. Let's see. Can I go there? Yes. Okay, cool. Can y'all see this? Okay, cool. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this is really kind of a reflective exercise for caregivers to engage in. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit. There we go. So you're going to describe that current context. And this is usually where I like to start everybody, which like whenever we're like working with staff or my family, like, okay, where are we right now? What is going on right now? What is your child's current situation? Describe in detail their known struggles, like the ones that you are very much aware of, that you've either observed them or there's been enough verbal reports where you're just like, man, this probably has to be true, right? Describe home life, the differences in like maybe living between father and bio mom or adoptive or step, right? All of these situations. What's school life like? Do they struggle to make friends? Do they have a large friend community or a small friend community? What is their social life like? Do they go on play dates? Are they part of team sports? Do they engage in extracurricular activities? Or are they engaged in a lot of outside therapies that keep them at home or keep them in after school activities? These are all things that you would want the caregiver to describe, right? And then you would go into what are some of those similarities, if any, to the current situation or to your situation when you were that age. So if you are a caregiver or working with a caregiver of an 8-year-old, what are some of the similarities that they might be experienced or they may have experienced when they were 8 years old? This is sometimes a struggle for a lot of parents. And the reason I say that is that there is a tendency to not want to engage in reflective practices. There's a lot of reinforcement in looking towards the future. If you notice, we were going through those slides before, I didn't talk a ton about Rachel, stop it. Sorry. She just sent a Slack message saying that she's so excited about everybody because we're all so positive. Just kidding. Okay, so I'm just teasing, just razzing. Uh, so parents struggle often to okay, I'm gonna turn off my Slack because now I'm getting some really funny messages. Okay, cool. Um, Parents struggle to engage in reflective practices. And the reason that we as parents tend to struggle with that is because that might evoke some inner behavior, some somatic symptoms that we would rather avoid. We might not want to evoke crying. So in that exact moment, so why would we try to do something that might make us cry? Does that make sense? Because we look at that long term, we can't, sorry, look at that long term value of what that kind of reflective practice might actually do for the current context or for the future context? Hmm, I know. We instead like to think about what it could be like in the future because that's easier. It's somewhat avoidant, right? It kind of puts the buck on to tomorrow. Yeah. It always comes back around to doing reflexive practices. Always, always, always. We also in our agency recommend a lot of family therapy or just family or just therapy for caregivers in general, because we do find that that additional support can be really helpful because again, like that gets outside of our scope, right? When they start to like have these types of somatic feelings, they're like, nope, shut it down. That's 100% understandable, right? But sometimes this type of exercise can just be a little bit of a prompt, if you will, to engage in a shift within their current practices because they're like, oh man, like, for example, this is probably also because I've gone through therapy for many years, because how can you not do this job? Or how can you do this job without it? Um, so when I engage in this type of practice, I can be like, oh man, well, yeah, well, my parents also praised perfection. So that could be where that came from. Um, both of my parents have a very, we will call it quick, assertive way of communicating with each other and with anyone, as did my grandmother. So when I think about these types of similarities, I'm like, ah, yes. I am very quick to correct, it seems. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like how many of us got money for our grades? That's something that might be a difference, right? Like I don't give my kids money for their grades. I'm like, fantastic. You tried your best. Woohoo. I will let you know. And I tell this to Thomas, my son, all the time. Grades actually in elementary school don't matter. So you're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. No matter what happens, I need you to know that one time I made a 23 on a math test. And while I still remember it, even though it was in the fourth grade, nobody else does. And it's not on my permanent record. So we're good. And he was like, you did what? It was fractions, and fractions are hard. They still can be. Not as much as they used to be, but if you ask me to convert from decibels to fractions, I will break down. Just so you're aware. That is my reflective practice. That is what I've gained from that moment. So, if I were to base this off of what was happening with my son's school life, math was kind of hard in the moment. So, I was able to talk to him about this situation from my past to engage in this current context with him, which actually improved our relationship in the future, which is now. Huh, isn't that crazy? So, what supports do you wish that you had been given in this age? Well, maybe instead of math drills at the dinner table, um, like my dad would get like butcher paper out. It's all very traumatic when I think about it. It's fine. Everything is fine. It's about changing. So, math drills were not like super helpful for me at the dinner table on butcher paper. However, what I have found is that I needed time to process the patterns in math and had somebody show me those patterns earlier. So, what have I done for my son? Shown him the patterns in math. And he was like, oh my God, well, this just makes so much sense. I was like, I know. You get it now, don't you? And he was like, yes. And now math is like that for him. So again, this is one of those exercises that I find really awesome for myself. So, well, if you're a caregiver, even if you're not, go through this one. You can do this with like one of your learners for like that kind of perspective. So like let's say that you're um working with a child who might be going through kind of a difficult time. Describe some of those known struggles, right? Those things that are going on. Some of these could be really lengthy. Some of them might be a little less known because you're just now starting to learn that, like learn what that caregiver is willing to share and expose within the environment. And sometimes you're like, oh, I need y'all to have a little bit more stimulus control when I'm around, right? I know too much about you. So you can write about either of those, right? Or if you are a caregiver, do your own. I know it really would be. It would be a great exercise for a lot of your clients. I mean, like for your like on your caseload for you to do. Yeah, absolutely. And then that's also then going to give you an a shared experience and inner behavior and a shared inner behavior, this transcendental, no, this transient relationship of what the caregiver might be experiencing whenever you give this questionnaire to them. And I will say this, often, whenever we have caregivers who are struggling to change their own behavior, this is going to be very difficult for them to do, right? So recognize that what was helpful for you when you were completing this exercise and say, you know what? I found this question to be really hard to answer. So it's understandable if you find this hard to answer too, because I get it. Sometimes when we think about our past, it can kind of hurt a little bit. And say, like, or if like your past is too much of a struggle, like maybe this might be something that you can explore with your therapist the next time that y'all are together and say, like, this is an ACT exercise in selfish context. I haven't met a single therapist that we work with who does not love that our agency practices ACT and uses it with caregivers too. They love it. And they're like, oh my God, what? Okay, cool. Yes. And like they like email me exercises. They like, hey, have you seen this? And like I get text messages. Like they love it. They're like, have you seen this grounding exercise? So if you do know that they're in some sort of family therapy or individual counseling, recommend that for them. Say like, hey, this is something that we've found helpful with a lot of our families. And because you've done this yourself, you can say, I found this part to be helpful, or I didn't find this part to be as helpful. So if there's part of this you're like, man, I think I need to skip this, that's fine. And then maybe ask why we needed to skip it or you needed to skip it. Um, okay, cool. Let's get back into this guy. There we go. All right. So another way that we can apply this, yes, just checking time, doing great. Another way that we can apply this is how we observe. So, what do you notice in yourself? Well, you can notice what happens before and what happens after. Basic ABA stuff. You can notice that before this somatic experience happens, there's this antecedent that occurs. And that sometimes, whenever this somatic symptom continues, this is the contingency, or when this somatic symptom decreases, this is the contingency. For example, again, my son is, I don't know if I've shared this, I may have. I've shared this story many times today, so I apologize if I have already shared it within this frame of a community. So my son is flying with my parents right now. Yes, I have shared part of this. But I started to have a little bit of an anxiety attack before they were flying, like before they were about to take off. And I am already at our center and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so I told one of the behavior technicians, I was like, I just need you to know I'm doing some bilateral tapping right now because I am going through a little bit of an active anxiety attack. And I told her why. She goes, oh, that's understandable. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for validating it. And like suddenly I felt a little bit better. And I was like, all right, okay, okay, doing good, doing good. Then I had another little bit of a one. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And so I sent a voice memo to Rosie, obviously. I was like, I just need you to know this is what's happening right now. And then I talked myself through it. It's about a minute and a half, which is short for my voice memos, I will say. So I observed that after I engaged in this behavior, that there was this inner behavior of kind of relief, right? Like this, oh yeah, radical acceptance of like, I can't control this or whatever happens. But I can know that even though I'm not quite sure how I got through it, somehow my parents kept me alive. So hopefully, it's going to be okay. We'll see. We'll see what goes. Just kidding. No, it's going to be fine. It's a quick trip. But then I can observe those thoughts that come up, right? And I can observe how that might affect my mood. So if I were to ruminate on something, that's going to affect my mood in a more negative way, right? I might also notice what happens to my body. So notice that like when I started to kind of have this kind of like anxiety attack, like my shoulders are rising, right? So when I was doing tapping, my shoulders were easing in tension. And as I was talking through it, my body was relaxing, right? So I can observe these things. You can observe these things. And then what will end up happening is that when you're with a learner and you're trying to identify when they are truly HRE, you're going to say like, "Oh man, they're actually not regulated right now." And here's how I can tell because what I can observe in their body is the shared experience that I have in my body when I'm not regulated, right? That's why, as practitioners, we have to practice ACT and psychological flexibility if we're expecting this to be effective for others. So, what are our steps to observing ourselves? Well, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you currently doing? What are you currently doing sometimes seems, really like, what are you talking about? I'm sitting here. But also, it can be a broader idea. Are your committed actions aligning to what is going to be helpful for your thoughts and your body? And that's always something for us to be thinking about as behavior analysts as well. Okay, so y'all, thanks so much. This was a fun one to do. I like self as context a lot. Perspective taking is one of my all-time favorites. I will say we're going to be doing present moment for step 6, but present moment within supervision practices. So I'm really excited about that one. It'll be a supervision CEU this next time. It might not be on June 19th. I've got to double check some dates. It might be on June 26th instead. So I will definitely post about it and I will update the calendar invite if that is the case, just in case that is what needs to happen. Again, if you are looking for CEUs, please email ace@acrossenvironments.com for your certificate of completion with your um, BCBA number, your ID number, not your BACB ID, but just your BCBA number. Okay, everyone. Thank you so very much. Here are our references. Oh, yes, good, because I wanted to see that one article. Uh, oh, yeah, it was still Hayes technically for that one article, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll give it to him. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. Again, if you've ever got any questions, please email me at meg@acrossenvironments.com, and I'm always happy to help. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.